Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2016.
I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for financial services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2016.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak thereto?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to present the bill on behalf of the government, which seeks to amend the Limited Liability Companies Law 2016 in order to require limited liability companies incorporated in the Cayman Islands to establish and maintain beneficial ownership registers which may be searchable by a local competent authority. Madam Speaker, this is a companion bill to the Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016. This bill is necessary to ensure that all types of companies are appropriately captured as part of new requirements to establish and maintain a register of beneficial ownership for a limited liability company, along with all of the usual corporate registers required for that type of company. Madam Speaker, in terms of the composition of the bill, Clause 1 provides a short title and commencement. Clause 2 amends the principal law by the insertion of a new Part 12. This new part is structured and functions exactly as the new Part 17, Roman 17A, in the Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016. Clause 3, Madam Speaker, deals with the transitional provision that no prosecution may be commenced against a limited liability company for an offense under Section 100 as enacted by Clause 2 of this law, unless the act or omission that constituted the offense took place at least 1 year after coming into force of that section. That's effectively, Madam Speaker, a grace period to allow service providers and those companies to ensure that they are fully in compliance. Madam Speaker, there are some committee stage changes as previously discussed in relation to the Companies Amendment Bill. There was significant local industry consultation and feedback, as well as feedback in this case from Her Majesty's government on the issue of ensuring that as a stakeholder, because they're a party to the exchange of notes, that their views are included. So, Madam Speaker, the changes which we will put forward in relation to this bill, in principle, mirrors the changes to the Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill that we have already had a second reading on. So, Madam Speaker, in short, that concludes my presentation on this bill. I hope that it is clear why these amendments are being made, and I commend the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2016 to this Honourable House for passage. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the Honourable Minister for Financial Services, should he wish to reply.
Madam Speaker, just to say thanks to all honourable members for their tacit support. Thank you.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2016 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2016 has been given a second reading.
The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016.
Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak to the bill?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this amendment bill seeks to remove the obligation now placed on the Governor and Cabinet to deal with an application for an exemption under Section 58. That is a tax exemption. Madam Speaker, the process with the tax exemptions certificates has changed from years past as a result of the... One moment, Madam Speaker. Sorry, Madam Speaker, thank you. Has changed from years past where the process involved the governor under Section 7.2 of the former Constitution executing tax exemption certificates, which were then reviewed and approved subsequently by Cabinet on a weekly basis, or once per month on a weekly basis through a Cabinet paper. This was effectively a ratification of what was already done. But, Madam Speaker, subject or further to, let me say, the 2009 Constitution, the clear advice provided to the Cabinet Office was that the original process could no longer continue, and Cabinet would have to actually approve each of the grants for the exemptions. So, Madam Speaker, that is a process that has been followed until now, and we are seeking to change that process by way of these amendments to relevant legislation, which includes the trust law, exempted limited partnership law, limited liability companies law, and exempted limited partnership regulations. Of course, the latter does not come to this Honourable House. But that is the context in which we're seeking to make these changes, Madam Speaker, so that rather than Cabinet having to deal with what is effectively an administrative matter where the companies have demonstrated that they have satisfied all of the requirements to have these exemptions issued, that they're actually issued to minimize the work that involves Cabinet. Madam Speaker, there will be a requirement ongoing for, similar to what existed in the past, for on a monthly basis a report to be given to Cabinet which shows the numbers of the tax exemption certificates which have been applied for and issued as an administrative process. So, Madam Speaker, I think in broad terms that is the rationale for this bill, and there will be others in connection with the legislation, amendments to that legislation that I listed earlier. In terms of the composition of the bill, Madam Speaker, the Part 1 contains the short title, and that's Clause 1. Part 2 deals with, contains Clauses 4 and 5, and that deals with the amendment of Section 58 of the Limited Liability Companies Law 2016. Madam Speaker, I think that that will suffice in terms of presentation of this bill, but I certainly would like to thank the ministry staff, members of the Financial Services Legislative Committee, the Legal Drafting Department, and also private sector stakeholders. Madam Speaker, that's true of any of the bills, certainly that I bring, and I imagine most ministries. But I want to definitely say that on this occasion as well as any other opportunity. So I therefore, Madam Speaker, commend the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016 to this Honourable House.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, just to say thank you to all other honourable members of the House for their tacit support.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2, Bill 2016, be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Limited Liability Companies Amendment Number 2, Bill 2016, has been given a second reading.
The Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2016.
Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2016.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Minister wish to speak thereto?
I do, Madam Speaker. If you could give me a few seconds just to organize my papers here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to present the bill on behalf of the government, which seeks to, similar to the previous bill, remove the obligation now placed on the Governor and Cabinet to deal with an application for an exemption under Section 38 of the principal law in this case. Madam Speaker, for the same reasons outlined earlier, this amendment bill is a part of the, or one of the components of the relevant legislation which seeks to improve and expedite the tax undertaking certificate approval process. And in terms of the arrangement, Madam Speaker, Part 1 contains the short title, which is comprised of Clause 1. Part 2 deals with the amendment of Section 38 of the Exempted Limited Partnership Law 2014, which is comprised of Clause 2. Madam Speaker, I think that sets out the rationale and the content of the bill. I thank you and commend this bill to this Honourable House.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Recognize the fifth elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give just a brief response, or contribution to the debate on the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2016. Madam Speaker, in terms of going forward, can we maybe, just a suggestion, if the bills that are all pertaining to this line of amendment, could we deal with them all in one sway, or no?
It has not traditionally been dealt that way. Obviously, the House can move a motion to do almost anything. If that's the will of the government and the opposition to move the finance bills one time, then you'd have to bring a specific motion setting that out, while no motion is on the floor at the time. Otherwise, we'll have to proceed one by one, as tedious and as mundane as it may appear to be. I take it that your invitation to treat has not been accepted, so please proceed accordingly.
I don't have any other further additions, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the Honorable Minister responsible for financial services, should he wish to reply.
Just to thank members for their tacit support, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2016 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Exempted Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2016 has been given a second reading.
The Tax Concessions Amendment Bill 2016.
Recognize the Honourable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Tax Concession Amendment Bill 2016.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Minister wish to speak to his bill?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I certainly agree that I would have loved to have dealt with all these changes in one omnibus bill, but I have to defer to the wiser heads in the legal drafting department who thought that it would be more appropriate to deal with them separately. So, Madam Speaker, I think I have clearly outlined the rationale for the Tax Concessions Amendment Bill 2016. It is the main bit of legislation that needs to be amended, in addition to the other relevant pieces, that some of which we've dealt with already. It would have been better if they were put in a particular order, that it was more logical and sequential, but I think I've covered the rationale, the reasons behind the bill in terms of the policy change, what we're trying to achieve with that, Madam Speaker, the efficiencies, and the faster turnaround time. I think I will mention that we anticipate a process that normally now takes between 2 and 4 weeks sometimes, to now be a matter of a few days. So there's a very significant improvement in turnaround time and efficiency involved in this process. Madam Speaker, we will be doing purchasing some software to allow for the electronic issuance of tax undertaking certificates via the Registrar of Companies, so that it works through the Registrar of Companies portal. And certainly this is going to be a significant improvement, as I said, in terms of turnaround time and efficiencies. Madam Speaker, in terms of the composition of the bill, it is arranged in 2 clauses. Clause 1 deals with the short title of the bill. Clause 2 amends Section 6 of the Tax Concessions Law, 2011 revision, to appropriately assign responsibilities. Madam Speaker, that concludes my short presentation in respect to this bill. I again would like to thank those who have been engaged in making this bill and its related amendment bills happen, and I therefore commend this Tax Concessions Amendment Bill 2016 to this Honorable House for passage. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Just thank you to members for their tacit support, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Tax Concessions Amendment Bill 2016 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Tax Concession Amendment Bill 2016 has been given its second reading.
The Trust Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Trust Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak to this bill?
Just very briefly, Madam Speaker, again, this is hopefully the final piece of relevant legislation in connection with the tax concessions change in administrative process. The bill, Madam Speaker, is arranged in two parts. Part 1 contains the short title, which is Clause 1, and Part 2 deals with the amendment of Section 81 of the Trust Law 2011 revision with the power to give undertakings as to tax liability, which is comprised of Clause 2. That completes my presentation of this bill, Madam Speaker, and I commend this bill to this Honourable House for passage. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thanks once again, Madam Speaker, to members for their tacit support.
The question is that the Trust Amendment Number 2 Bill 2016 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Trust Amendments Number 2 Bill 2016 has been read a second time.
The Limited Liability Partnership Bill 2017.
Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Limited Liability Partnership Bill 2017.
The bill has been duly moved. Does Honorable Minister for Financial Services wish to speak thereto?
I beg your indulgence for another 30 seconds, Madam Speaker.
Granted.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I rise to present this bill on behalf of the government, which is a bill to introduce a limited liability partnership, or LLP, as a new type of business vehicle in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the LLP structure combines features of both companies and partnerships. Simply put, an LLP is a partnership with separate legal personality and limited liability for its partners. The introduction of an LLP, Madam Speaker, which is increasingly prevalent in competitive jurisdictions, would regain important ground for local professional firms to maintain their current position in a highly competitive global environment. This new LLP structure is also consistent with the jurisdiction's reputation for maintaining up-to-date legal frameworks for doing business both within and outside the islands. Madam Speaker, the local professional firms, including accountants and lawyers, usually establish themselves as general partnerships, where each partner is personally liable for all liabilities of the firm, which is a disadvantage for our local professional firms as they compete against each other as international service providers protected by, as they compete against each other, as they compete against other international service providers protected by limited liability. Madam Speaker, the bill is designed to therefore blend the key attractive features of a general partnership, but with the added key feature of separate legal personality, which is similar to a company. An LLP would, as a result, provide a new and attractive vehicle to carry on business with. Madam Speaker, in addition, an LLP is designed to be used by persons who conduct business outside the islands as well, and thus the bill has the potential to develop new product lines of business for international clients who utilize Cayman Islands structures. Accordingly, Madam Speaker, against this backdrop, the LLP structure is intended to complement existing Cayman Islands business vehicles and increase the attractiveness of the jurisdiction to professional service providers and thereby reinforce the country's reputation as a top-class international financial center. Madam Speaker, the features of the bill are as follows. An LLP may be formed for any lawful purpose. Registration is effected by payment of a fee and filing a registration statement with the General Registry. This is similar, Madam Speaker, to the process with an exempted limited partnership. Madam Speaker, an LLP is required to use one of the following suffixes in its name. It should either be limited liability partnership at the end, or LLP, or LSTOP, P-stop. No other partnership or entity registered under the partnership law may use this suffix in its name unless it is or will be an entity registered under the limited liability partnership law, or it is an existing entity that is currently being used, or it is currently using one of these suffixes in its name. So we're not trying to disenfranchise existing entities, Madam Speaker, that may have that name, but going forward, it can't be used outside unless it is registered under this law, on this bill, as it becomes law. The bill, Madam Speaker, also seeks to take into account existing Cayman Islands laws and considerations, including preserving the rules of equity and common law applicable to general partnerships as modified by the partnership law to apply to a limited liability partnership, except insofar as they are inconsistent with the provisions of the law. The bill also allows, Madam Speaker, for the conversion of an existing general partnership into an LLP, and registration by way of continuation of foreign LLPs in Cayman, or into Cayman, is also part of the provisions of the bill, Madam Speaker. Lastly, Madam Speaker, this bill is consistent with international standards, and provisions have been made for various registers to be maintained and, as appropriate, filed or made available to local authorities, being a register of members, register of managers, and a register of mortgages and charges, and maintaining books of account for at least 5 years. Madam Speaker, the bill is arranged in 6 parts. Part 1 contains the preliminary provisions and is comprised of clauses 1 to 3. Part 2 deals with the features of a limited liability partnership and is comprised of clauses 4 and to 11. Part 3 deals with the relationship of a partner with other partners in the limited liability partnership and their relationship with third parties and includes clauses 12 to 17. Part 4, Madam Speaker, deals with the registration and regulation of limited liability partnerships and is comprised of clauses 18 to 21. Part 5, Madam Speaker, provides for the winding up, dissolution, and strike off of the limited liability partnership and contains clauses 22 to 31. Part 6, Madam Speaker, makes provision for the conversion of a firm, which is in that case a general partnership, to a limited liability partnership, and is comprised of clauses 32 to 36. Lastly, Madam Speaker, Part 7 sets out miscellaneous provisions and general matters, and those are set out in clauses 22 to 23. Madam Speaker, that sets out the content of the bill, and I would like to, as usual, thank the ministry staff, in particular the LLP subcommittee of the Financial Services Legislative Committee, Madam Speaker, for their collective efforts and tireless efforts in getting this done. And I should also mention, Madam Speaker, that one of the person who was the chairman of this subcommittee was Mr. Bruce Putterill of late memory, and this bill was a result largely of his driving efforts to work with government to get this type of legislation done for this new structure. So certainly thank them all, Madam Speaker, and wish to recognize them all, in particular Mr. Putterill. He certainly he was a wonderful man, and he made tremendous or extraordinary contributions to the financial services industry and the local community. I should also add that he served on the board of the Maritime Authority for many years and was instrumental in the development of the shipping registry to the significant player that it is today. He played a leading role in a number of other areas, including hospice care. It was certainly, this bill, Madam Speaker, represents one of his final contributions to this country that he had adopted and loved. So, Madam Speaker, with that, I thank you and commend this Limited Liability Partnership Bill 2017 to honourable members of this House for passage. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the 5th elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to make a few observations on the limited liability partnership and to basically question the need for this bill, because on reading it, it doesn't appear to be of particular use as a financial product for international bodies. And if it's not designed for that, what types of local businesses will be using this structure? That is, Madam Speaker, just to be clear. was trying to see why the bill is necessary. Because there are some provisions that I'll get into which cause some concern, including the ability for creation of an entity that forgives, as I read it, past partners of liability in Section 7 of the bill in Part 2. Madam Speaker, we make laws to enhance the attractiveness of this island. We make products that our practitioners, be they accountants or lawyers or otherwise, convince us of a pressing need to enhance the jurisdictional offerings. But when you look at the types of businesses that exist here that use the partnership structure, we're normally talking about law and accounting firms. And again, I guess there's a theme with me. And this, if this is not going to be primarily something that the international market uses, what are the mechanisms in place to ensure that LLPs are substantially Cayman owned and who benefits from the bill locally? Madam Speaker, if you look at those provisions of forgiving past liabilities, you have to wonder in what perceived instances that will be beneficial to, again, those international clients that we have, and if these are pressing innovative structures that are being called for. Madam Speaker, if we start creating these types of structures and we don't look at the unintended consequences, then there could be some ramifications that might not be what is both something of a step forward in terms of in terms of legislation. Madam Speaker, if the Minister of Financial Services can look to answer those questions, is this like the limited liability companies where a number of practitioners have said that this is going to move a lot of business to the Cayman Islands? it would be one thing. But if we're talking primarily about local companies or local partnerships being able to morph into a new animal without having some of the features of the existing limited partnerships, then again, I look specifically at Section 7 and point that out, because, and maybe the minister can elucidate and give some clarification about what I said before about forgiving liabilities of former partners. That is something that is potentially not a good thing. Madam Speaker, I listened to the minister, and maybe he can say what other types of businesses use existing partnership structures in the Cayman Islands, and whether or not this is something that we're marketing overseas because we feel a need for it to attract new business. We heard that it was a new and unattractive vehicle to carry on business both inside and outside of the islands, and that it would complement existing business structures. We need to look at again those business structures and how they might suddenly all opt to be limited liability partnerships for various reasons. Madam Speaker, I don't have much to ask other than those questions and perhaps a clarification if my understanding of Section 7 is incorrect about the forgiveness of the past partners' liabilities, and I will leave the minister to answer those in his winding up. Thank you.
Before calling on whether any other member wish to speak, I wish to recognize the presence of a representative from the Cayman Islands London office, and welcome back to the jurisdiction, Mr. Eric Bush. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. I recognize the second elected member from Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to make a very short contribution in support of the bill presently before the House. Madam Speaker, this bill is a long time coming, because I remember it was in the year 2000. I was in my 10th year as a partner in a public accounting firm, practicing as a general partnership, that began to lobby the government of the day to bring legislation like this, to provide a vehicle for people like professional accountants to find some way to limit their liability, their individual liabilities, in the event of any sort of catastrophic claims against the firm for primarily negligence or malpractice. And so I'm particularly pleased to see it finally get before this House for consideration. Madam Speaker, the Minister presenting the bill spoke ably of the fact that primarily, accountants and law firms that would find this vehicle particularly attractive. But the truth of the matter is, Madam Speaker, it would apply any professional services type firms, maybe an architect firm, it may be a group of doctors, would find this type of structure particularly attractive in their ability to practice. Heretofore, anything other than a corporate structure would leave a partner or an individual subject to unlimited liability in the practice of his profession. Now, this type of a vehicle does give some protection in that if a particular partner is negligent, the entire partnership and all the other partners, you don't have what is known as contagion, in third-party contagion. So it is an extremely effective vehicle, one which I think, professional services firms here on the island welcome. In fact, I know when I mentioned to my former colleagues that this was finally making its way to the Legislative Assembly, they were ecstatic with it. I do know most of the professional service accounting firms on the island practice as general partnerships. I know they've been practicing that way for, in case of at least one firm that I know, 50 years. But this will provide the avenue for them to re-register and practice on this new form of vehicle that will give them the security and the protection that they seek. And it's not a matter of trying to avoid liability or to evade claims whatsoever, Madam Speaker. It's a matter of limiting it and the effect of contagion. That's what this type of a structure really does for a professional services firm. I know one other firm too, Madam Speaker, that actually practices in a corporate structure. But they did that because they were so keen to try and find a way to shelter themselves from unlimited individual liability that they opted for it. And to be honest, when I was managing partner of the firm here, we considered it in great length, but opted instead to wait until this structure would come because it is the preferred structure for a professional services firm. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, would like to commend the Minister, commend the Ministry as well for their perseverance in getting the legislation here before this House, and I look forward this afternoon to supporting it and supporting the second reading of it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize Honorable Minister for Financial Services.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And let me start by, I thank the fifth elected member from Georgetown for his comments and questions. And I also would like in particular to thank thank the second elected member from Georgetown for demonstrating the benefit of his experience in the professional environment for many decades and understanding the issues that are relevant, not just to business and the practice of an audit or accounting profession in the Cayman Islands, but also what happens externally in the broader world as well. Madam Speaker, he spoke about the essential need for this type of structure and why it is of great interest to practitioners, whether they are in the legal profession or whether they're in the accounting profession or whether they are in any other profession in this country. Madam Speaker, I don't wish to go into any further detail in terms of the need for it because I think clearly we have demonstrated in terms of my comments and those from the second elected member for Georgetown, why this bill is appropriate. I'd say, Madam Speaker, that it is a piece of legislation, as he said, that the local professional services industries have been waiting on for a very long time, and it has been one of the items on the Financial Services Legislative Committee's agenda for a very long time, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it certainly provides a better structure for businesses to operate through, for the reasons that the second elected member from Georgetown articulated. Of course, the fifth elected member from Georgetown referred to Clause 7, and that's 1, effectively 2 and 3 of the bill, Madam Speaker. And yes, it does provide that a partner or former partner won't be liable for a debt or loss of the limited liability partnership, including any debt of or loss caused by the act or omission of another partner or former partner in the limited liability partnership. That, Madam Speaker, goes directly to the point the second elected member from Georgetown made in terms of contagion. It allows professionals to operate within an environment where they have effectively the benefits of a partnership, but also having the benefits of limited liability without actually having to go to a full corporate structure. Madam Speaker, I want to be clear here that this vehicle and the concept of having liability limited for partners is perfectly normal in a corporate context, because as a shareholder, your liability is limited to any amount unpaid on the shares. So if you can use a corporate vehicle in this context without complaint, why should there be an issue with utilizing a new form of vehicle, which we haven't invented, Madam Speaker? It exists in many of the major economies of the world. In fact, if you look around in most of the large economies, Madam Speaker, you will see many of the partnerships or the professions, the businesses that operate in the area of professions as LLPs or limited liability partnerships. So this is, I think, something that probably originated in the US, but it has certainly spread around the rest of the world in terms of the major economies as a vehicle which has tremendous flexibility for businesses that are operating in this area. This is not, Madam Speaker, a way of, I think there was some suggestion that it perhaps may be a way around some existing licensing regime. There's nothing of the sort, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me take an accounting practice. Most accounting practices, as is the case with law firms as well, have historically been general partnerships. They have historically been regulated under the Trade and Business Licensing Law because there was no other law which regulated them. Law firms or legal partnerships have historically been regulated under the Legal Practitioners Law. The Trade and Business Licensing Law, as mentioned earlier in the debate on the amendments to the bill, Trade and Business Licensing Amendment Bill, does not apply to businesses that are regulated by another law without reference to that. So in relation to the accounting profession, they are regulated by the Trade and Business Licensing Law. But where there are partnerships, clearly the local companies control law license provision doesn't apply to them because they're not a company. In relation to legal partnerships, because they're regulated by the legal practitioners law and not by the trade and business licensing law, and the fact that they're not companies as well, again, equally the local companies. The trade and business license and the LCCL doesn't apply. So, Madam Speaker, whether you are a general partnership or whether you are an LLP, whatever is relevant to the licensing regime for that particular type of business is going to continue to be relevant. So this doesn't allow any kind of end around anything at all. This is just a new type of structure from which a business can operate to conduct the type of business that is licensed in different ways. So the accounting profession is licensed and regulated under the trade and business, and now actually partly under the accounting law as well. And the legal practices are regulated and licensed under the legal practitioners law. So that doesn't change, Madam Speaker. So I'm not sure that I understand. Obviously, in a generic sense, I understand when the fifth elected member from Georgetown talks about unintended consequences. I understand what he means in a generic sense, but I don't quite know what he means in this particular context, because I don't see that this changes the regime in relation to licensing of businesses at all, Madam Speaker. Yes, the bill allows for existing businesses to effectively be re-registered as limited liability partnerships. That is not much different, Madam Speaker, from having a general partnership operating, which you decide to incorporate into a company, which has less flexibility, perhaps, than this limited liability partnership structure that we're proposing here. So, Madam Speaker, equally, the question of Caymanian ownership isn't a result of this particular structure. It's a question of the licensing regime. This structure in and of itself does not make any changes in respect to that, doesn't change the issue at all. So I don't think it should be directed towards this particular structure or this particular bill in terms of that context, Madam Speaker. How are you going to be a back door? So Madam Speaker, I do think in this context, this bill is very complementary to the existing and what we have done as a government in the last 4 years, very much expanding and growing type of products that are useful and favorable to the financial services industry. We have been delivering, Madam Speaker, on a number. In fact, this piece probably makes the final one of the final, if not the final, very significant agenda items that the Financial Services Legislative Committee has had as a part of their wish list for probably 7 to 10 years now. And we are hopefully going to finally deliver this to create a vehicle which improves the level of efficiency in which businesses can operate in this country. But it's not just for local consumption, Madam Speaker. I have been assured that this particular type of structure is attractive in a number of different scenarios for international business. So I would not at all believe that its use will be exclusive to the local professional services in the islands. But certainly, Madam Speaker, it brings the jurisdiction as a whole into line with many other top class and first world jurisdictions, particularly in relation to financial services, where these types of vehicles are and have been in place for quite some time, Madam Speaker, and have demonstrated that they are the preferred vehicle for professional services firms to utilize. Madam Speaker, with that, I will say thanks to all honourable members of this House for their contributions, and I thank you for the opportunity to present this bill to honourable members of this House, and I commend it for passage. Thank you.
The question is the Limited Liability Partnership Bill 2017 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. The ayes have it. The Limited Liability Partnership Bill 2017 has been given a second reading.
The Older Persons Bill 2017.
Recognize Honorable Minister responsible for Community Affairs. Members, we're on item number 9.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled, "A Bill for a Law to Promote, Protect, and Advance the Well-Being of Older Persons, to establish the Council of Older Persons, and for incidental and connected purposes."
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honorable Minister wish to speak to this bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Older Persons Bill aims to ensure that older persons are able to freely access and participate in all aspects of society within the Cayman Islands as provided by the Bill of Rights, Freedoms, and Responsibilities enshrined in the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, and to advance equal opportunity for older persons to achieve independence, participation, care, self-fulfillment, and dignity as advocated by the United Nations Principles on the Rights of Older Persons. The report of the Legal Subcommittee of the Cayman Islands Older Persons Policy Steering Committee 2016 was developed to support the policy. The report provided strategic guidance to promote the rights of older persons to access and participate in all aspects of society within the Cayman Islands. It recognized that there is no law which explicitly addresses the rights of older persons, and in the absence of a comprehensive piece of legislation, the rights of older persons remain vague and at a continued risk of infringement. Madam Speaker, therefore, the Legal Subcommittee was of the view that any proposed legislative reform with respect to older persons should take into account efforts aimed at respecting their dignity, ensuring fair and equitable treatment, and providing protection against any form of unfair discrimination. In approving the Cayman Islands Older Persons Policy 2016-2035 on October 21st, 2016, Cabinet proceeded to authorize drafting instructions of an older persons bill, and over the past 3 months, the draft Older Persons Bill 2017 was developed and submitted to Cabinet for approval. Approval was granted by Cabinet on January 31st, 2017. This piece of legislation is primarily for the benefit of older persons and those persons who have been entrusted with responsibilities under the bill, in particular, public servants will work towards ensuring that older persons are cared for and that their rights are protected. The bill therefore speaks to the creation of a council for older persons, whose key purpose and aim will be to act as a coordinating body between government entities, other service providers, and older persons. The council will advise on the entire gamut of issues related to the welfare of older persons, advocate for the enhancing of the quality of lives of older persons, and advocate for the promotion and development of programs, projects, and legislative measures to improve the quality of life of older persons in the Cayman Islands. Regulations will be made to facilitate the introduction of a voluntary older persons registry, and the council will assist with ensuring that any relevant and necessary supplemental legislation is enacted or current legislation is revised to give full effect to the aim and purpose of the bill. Madam Speaker, there are 5 parts to this bill. Part 1 sets out the preliminary provisions and is comprised of 2 clauses. Clauses 1 and 2 provide the short title and commencement of the draft legislation with the definition of various words used in the context of the legislation. Part 2 contains clauses 3 to 9 and speaks to the establishment of the Council for Older Persons, setting out the Council's constitution and procedure. The bill advocates for the Council to be an independent body and will comprise equal representations of older persons, professional stakeholders, and experts from the public and private sectors. Therefore, Clause 3 seeks to establish the Council and a supporting executive secretary and sets out the Council's constitution and procedure. The membership of the Council for Older Persons will be appointed by Cabinet for a term of not less than 4 years, and serving members will be eligible for reappointment for 1 further 4-year term. The Council will be comprised of 1 older person representative from each district across the Cayman Islands, 2 members from the private sector or persons who are affiliated with a non-governmental advocacy or service organization that works for the rights of older persons, 1 being a doctor specializing in geriatrics or familiar with medical issues relevant to older persons, and the other being an attorney at law. 1 representative from the department responsible for the subject of older persons, preferably a social worker with a minimum experience of 5 years in managing socio-economic aspects of older persons in the Cayman Islands. 1 representative from the ministry responsible for community affairs. 1 representative from the ministry responsible for health. 1 representative from the ministry responsible for each or all of the following: education, employment, and gender affairs, and 1 executive secretary to be appointed from within the Cabinet's office. The total membership will be comprised of at least 13 members, and Council will meet a minimum of 12 times per calendar year, but also meet more often if necessary. Madam Speaker, Clause 4 speaks to the functions and powers of the Council. The Council will be chaired by an older person, and the listed public entities will have assigned responsibilities for the development and delivery of services to older persons once formed. The Council shall take steps towards ensuring the promotion, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the Cayman Islands Older Persons Policy, serve as a referral facility to provide information on services and resources for older persons, promote participation, involvement, and social inclusion of older persons, promote a skills bank of older persons, advocate and monitor the level of public education on the changing needs of older persons within the community, maintain a voluntary registry of older persons, and refer matters or incidents regarding violation of rights of older persons to relevant authorities. Clauses 5 and 6 set out the duties of the chair, deputy chair, and executive secretary of the Council. Clauses 7, 8, and 9 deal with the remuneration of members who are not public servants and make provisions for the immunity and indemnity of the Council, along with the executive secretary who is not treated as a member of the Council. Madam Speaker, Part 3 and Clauses 10 and 11 deal with the voluntary older persons register, a confidential register with the particulars of older persons will be maintained by the Council, and older persons will be given the opportunity to voluntarily
have their personal information included in the register. Part 4 and clauses 12 to 17 of the bill makes general provision for the rights of older persons and makes provision in respect of specific benefits to which older persons are entitled on an equal basis with other persons. Part 5 contains clauses 18 to 20 and empowers Cabinet to make regulations to give effect to the legislation. Clause 20 binds the Crown. Madam Speaker, I take this time to extend special appreciation to Ms. Bethia Christian, Legislative Counsel of the Legislative Drafting, for the drafting of the Older Persons Bill, and the following members for developing the Legal Subcommittee report. Mrs. Deborah Webb Siblis, Chairperson of the Legal Subcommittee of the Cayman Islands Older Persons Policy Steering Committee. Mrs. Stephanie Azan, Deputy Chairperson of the Cayman Islands Legal Subcommittee of the Cayman Islands Older Persons Policy Steering Committee. Mrs. Cassandra Ferron, Secretary to the Legal Subcommittee of the Cayman Islands Older Persons Steering Committee. Ms. Anne-Marie Rambaran, Crown Counsel. Mrs. Annie Moulton, Older Persons and Representative of the Business and Professional Women's Club. Mrs. Rosa Whitaker Miles, Local Attorney at Law. Mr. Rollin Ebanks, Older Person. Mrs. Jasmine Powell, Social Worker, Department of Children and Family Services. Mr. Robert Lewis, Director, Policy Coordination Unit. And Ms. Haley Robinson, Student Intern assigned to the Policy Coordination Unit. Madam Speaker, I now seek the approval of this Honorable House in passing the Older Persons Bill 2017. The approval of this bill will advance the equal opportunity for older persons to freely access and participate in all aspects of society within the Cayman Islands and highlight their right to independence, participation, care, self-fulfillment, and dignity. Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I look forward to the full support of this Honorable House.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the honorable member from Northside.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to make a short contribution to the bill for a law to promote, protect, and advance the well-being of older persons, to establish the Council for Older Persons or incidental and connected purposes. I notice, Madam Speaker, that the definition of older persons is over the age of 65 years, except where the law provides for a person who is less than 6 years to be treated as an older person for the purposes of receiving a pension. We suggest here that people who may be retired for medical reasons and receiving pensions will be treated as older persons. And, Madam Speaker, I guess the greatest concern I have with the bill is the makeup of the Council of Older Persons. I'm not sure, Madam Speaker, in the schedule where it says members who are older persons of varying ages and representative of each district in the Cayman Islands. Are we talking geographic districts or political districts? Because I think we need to make it clear, because that significantly changes the number of persons in the council. And if we are talking of geographical districts, that's 6. When you look then at the makeup of the council, we can in fact have equal numbers on the board as ex officio members. Because when you can appoint one from each ministry, following education, employment, and gender affairs, that's 3, and then there's 5. I really don't see the point of having all these ex officio members on the council, because I would hope, and when you look at the functions of the council, if the council is going to be an advocate for older persons, as opposed to what the minister said, a coordinating body between older persons and the provisions provided by government. I think it's two entirely different things. If it's going to be a coordinating body, then you can see the importance of having these people on the board. If it is going to be an advocacy group, which is what I support for older persons, because I think that older persons need to have such a council to advocate on their behalf, particularly to a government that is not addressing the needs of older persons, then I think we have too many official members, because the people that are on here, ex-official members, are the exact people that the council would need to advocate to represent the older persons to get the services that the older person needs. And that, I would think, would put the ordinary members of the council in an awkward position of having to advocate, i.e. criticize the lack thereof, or advocate to promote for services thereof that the government department hasn't thought of, with the heads of the persons that they need to criticize sitting on the board with them. And how does the council adequately monitor and ensure that senior citizens are getting the services from these people if they are equal numbers of them on the board? So with those few concerns, Madam Speaker, I support the bill, but I would like to see that the council is an advocacy group and doesn't have all those civil servants on it, which is going to be very intimidating for people over 65 in the community. I mean, that's just a fact. But the chairman is bound by his committee. Well, if you can take the chairman from those and out and put him as one of the older persons, then they're outnumbered, because it'll be 8 against 7. So, Madam Speaker, I think we need to look at the makeup of the council and more clearly define what the role of the council is intended to be. Thank
you. Recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say very briefly that we support this law, this bill, and I hope it would be an advocate for government to act, but also for the council to look at the wider need of our senior citizens. Madam Speaker, our seniors, and been repeated over and over in this assembly, has been the people that made this country what it is. Many have already gone on, but have left a good footprint for us. And I certainly believe that having this law as an advocate is something that says to the country that this legislature appreciated and appreciate. In this modern times, for the seniors, here we can pay much more attention to their needs, to how they're being treated. Madam Speaker, I have no problem with the makeup of the council. I do believe that the areas which is designated to be represented is very important from the public servant point of view for the council. We had a social worker, one representative from the Ministry of Community Affairs, one representative from the Ministry for Health, Education, Employment, and Gender. These are very important areas, all having to do something with the work that government do to impact. And while they would be knowledgeable about the work of government, because of where they are placed, because of the ministry they come from, they would understand wider needs and wider impacts on the older person. So I really have no problem with the bill. Just to thank the minister and the staff for bringing it together. And all I would say is, I don't know when they were going to appoint this council, but I would hope that they would be careful who is being appointed. Appoint from the districts I'm talking about, as far as persons representing each district. And I'm not saying that it must come to me as a representative or one of the representatives, but I certainly would hope that if they don't do that, that they would have persons on the council that is knowledgeable with dealing and capable of dealing with our senior citizens. Getting up to that age and living in a modern Cayman that they do. Getting over age 80, the stresses on them are sometimes severe. I know this. I just lost my mother at age 92 and my aunt at 102. So we're not living in the Cayman. My great-grandfather lived until he was 109. Don't worry, remember from East End. Not to worry. Whatever God ordains is best. But as I said, I just hope that the persons that are appointed from the district, and I trust that the minister and the chief officer listening, that they would make sure that these persons are knowledgeable, they're quite capable, they have patience, and they are not going to be dealing outrightly because that's the work of the various departments. But make sure that when they got people that's going to that council, understands and has had connections and has that ability to work be the advocate that is needed. Madam Speaker, spoken long enough, and I again want to thank the minister and the staff and, of course, the committee they had for the bill.
Does any other member wish to speak? The sixth elected member from the District of Georgetown, followed by the member from East End.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to make some brief comments on this bill entitled A Bill for a Law to Promote and Protect and Advance the Well-Being of Older Persons, to establish a Council of Older Persons and for incidental and connected purposes. Madam Speaker, those over the age of 60 are expected to reach an unprecedented number of 1 billion by the end of the century worldwide. Here in Cayman, Madam Speaker, 2014, there were, according to the census, there were Economic and Statistics Office, there were 3,792 persons over the age of 65. And in 2015, Madam Speaker, there was 4,040 persons. So we see the increase here as well, representing in 2015 some just over 6.7% of our population. Madam Speaker, this bill aims to ensure that the older persons within our community have access to all aspects of our society, that they have equal opportunity to achieve and to be a part of an independent life. They have care, Madam Speaker. They are afforded full opportunity to maintain their dignity and to have self-fulfillment. Madam Speaker, it is important as a country that the rights of our older persons be protected, to be protected from discrimination, to have security, and have their private and family lives protected. They should have full access to justice, Madam Speaker. And older persons should be free to fully participate in political and public life should they please, to participate as a candidate in an election or simply all opportunity to cast a vote. Madam Speaker, I look forward to the formation of the council as they have, in my opinion, a lot of work to do and a lot of areas and opportunities to enhance the lives of our elderly. Looking at opportunities such as opportunities for our elderly to remain in their homes as long as possible. Perhaps looking at ideas like reverse mortgages so that they can enjoy the rest of their time not worrying about whether it's bank loans or electricity bills, but to actually take the assets they have and be able to borrow the money in advance of their passing, that they can live their final years not stressing about it. Madam Speaker, perhaps the Council will have an opportunity to look at other means of housing and housing opportunities for our elderly. Healthcare is another issue that we see as representatives on a day-to-day basis. Insurance, Madam Speaker, I don't understand why, after someone over the age of 65 has proven that they cannot afford the health insurance coverage locally, they go through the assessment and then they're just given 3 months. By the time they get an appointment with the doctor, Madam Speaker, the 3 months have expired and then they have to go through the entire process again. I hope that the council will some way find a way to ensure that this is not another added stress that I just dealt with a constituent this week, and I thank the councillor for helping out and the ministry, who has major health issues but doesn't have insurance and haven't gone back for the remaining of his treatment because he's stressed out about the HSA calling him for the fees that the bills he already has. So he decided to forego the medical care to avoid additional costs. Madam Speaker, we should ensure the council will have the duty to ensure that there's a proper plan in place in case of a national emergency, whether it be an earthquake or any other forms of emergency, that our elderly have immediate aid and are a priority in these cases. Madam Speaker, we also want to consider allowing our elderly to have the right to work, provide incentives to hire the elderly. This is done in many cities across the states, I know. as I have family who have retired, who lived in the States and retired and were given jobs as trolley drivers, etc., where the companies are incentivized to hire them. Reduce the red tape and perhaps look at ways that we can make hiring retirees attractive to local businesses. Madam Speaker, I also believe that our elderly should be given an opportunity for education as well. Just because they've reached that retirement age or because they've reached 65 shouldn't mean that they should not be given a full right to develop their full potential. It is now that they have the time, and we as a country should give them the ability to continue their education and to see their full potential. As we all know, some of our retirees are still quite sprightly and willing and able to participate. Madam Speaker, our prisoners are given 3 hot meals a day, exercise, health care, and a roof over their head. Madam Speaker, our elderly, at a minimum, deserve the same. And so I close by congratulating the minister and all those who worked in the committees to bring this bill to this honorable House, and I offer it my full support. Thank you.
Member from Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to make a contribution to the bill for older persons. Protect and advance the well-being of older persons. Madam Speaker, I don't mean to throw a wrench in the gears, but I don't think this has gone far enough. I hear the 6 elected members saying things like hiring and the likes. Madam Speaker, I see the council, the establishment of a council, but it is to advocate. What about things like ensuring that government, it needs to be in law. We have retirees, police officers, and then we hire security companies to watch over the door at the glass house. That's the kind of stuff that we need to ensure that government must set examples with. That's the kind of stuff that we need to do that with. And I would I would ask the minister to get those things in there, in this law, because they're not here. It's all well and good to say we're going to do it, and then, but the council has nothing to do except the chairperson is going to chair the meeting, apprising the council of matters raised by stakeholders and the likes. Who are they going to give it to? They're going to advocate for older persons, but there is nothing in the law saying, for instance, that government must, retirees must have first preference if they're physically and mentally able to do the job. Madam Speaker, there are many places around our neighbors where they're encouraged older persons like discounts. Like government will waive all duties on all importation that they have to make for older persons over the age of 60, whatever, 55. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. Not saying that the council will advocate. What are they going to advocate? And Madam Speaker, it says the council shall, in carrying out its function, adopt a consultative approach in relation to the community of older persons and other critical stakeholders. So they will consult. But what then? I want to see more, and the minister may have it, but it reminds me of the disability one. No teeth. They have no value and no resources to do anything. Who are they going to advocate to? To the government, when the government has not even committed themselves to hiring older persons and giving them preference, like I said earlier about the police officers. In the meantime, we got people at the glass house, right in government glass house. Right, not a glass house, Madam Speaker, government administrative building. They're not even Caymanians. In the meantime, the Caymanians who are retired, we put them out to pasture, and they're physically and mentally capable of taking a visitor up to the Premier's office, wherein the Premier will know both of them. Now he's in the situation where someone from Timbuktu or right around the corner in India or Nepal or wherever takes one of his guests upstairs who he knows, but he don't know who is bringing his guests. That's what we got to use our people for. And if the government does not step up to the plate and do that, it's a waste. Yes, I agree with the 6th elected member from Georgetown. There is value in our old people. I'm not saying that when they reach retirement age, we keep them on and pressure them. We know how this country, for instance, Madam Speaker, pensions became a reality. 1999 or thereabouts, 97, somewhere in that area. Madam Speaker, retirees nowadays can't stop a peanut wagon if their mother was driving it. They can't. Especially those at the lower end of that salary scale.
They had it from 92, but they aborted the law.
And they're very capable of understanding, one, importantly, that Arden McLean is an MLA, because they were part of that political process. Joey Hugh from Georgetown is an MLA. And he going and who the Premier is, and one of us come to see or have an appointment see the Premier, they are very capable of knowing, Arden, come, let's go, the Premier waiting on you. I never got nobody call me by my first name. I've been by the administration building. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, when you go there to get in through the gate, which we don't have access through, some instances, many instances, they turn you around. That's why I don't go there. I go out by immigration and I walk across, a little exercise. When I did go there on the Rotundo, the little roundabout there, they slapped one big sticker on my glass saying that I couldn't park, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't expect any special privileges, but at the very least, they should know who I am or who any member of this parliament is. But if we had a retired Caymanian there, I bet you they would know every one of us because they went into those booths and they know who we are. That's what I'm talking about. That's where I want to see this. Get rid of the securities and hire retirees. If government does not make the first move, take the initiative, and Madam Speaker, I'm speaking now as the operation of government, hopefully directed by the political directorate. That's the kind of stuff that makes us feel at home, Madam Speaker. The Caymanians are interested in Parliament when the Speaker goes there for an appointment with the Governor or the Premier. She's escorted by another Caymanian. I know we probably don't have sufficient, but it doesn't take somebody from Timbuktu to be in charge of the security for the political directorate, Madam Speaker. Or for the official members, for that matter. That's where I part with some of the things we do. And I want to see us do more of the 6 elected member from Georgetown thing. Place value on them. That encourages them. Madam Speaker, they can sit in air condition up there too. And live longer too. I hear the leader of the opposition say his granduncle or grandfather lived to be 109. They can be around 109 up there too. Everybody else is wearing it out. That's we want to see the teeth in this, that we legislate that government must give them preference upon retirement to go in the jobs that are not physically demanding. And I don't mean to, I applaud the gallant efforts by the Minister for Community Affairs and all his staff. I think it's commendable that we at least try to get something in place. But I want to see it go further. Don't be afraid. They're our people. And if we make them work as, I don't know, security or errand people to go and pick up stuff, then they won't be a liability on government. They will be providing a service for us as a people. That's what I want. I don't want to see us just...
Honourable Member from Easton, we've reached the hour of interruption. I'll recognize Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that the business of the House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
The question is that Standing Order 10.2 be suspended to allow the House to continue beyond the hour of interruption. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, Standing Order 10.2 is hereby suspended. Please continue, member from East End.
Madam Speaker, there are a couple of other things that I would like to address and ask the minister to take note thereof. Madam Speaker, the appointment of civil servants as an executive secretary of the council without a vote. That's 6. And then we come back to a few days ago, and I spoke about to my good friend, the Minister for Finances. And we give them indemnity to carry out their civil service work. Really? Indemnity for what? Madam Speaker, 9 says the government shall indemnify a member of the council and the executive secretary against all claims, damages. For what? What kind of claims? What kind of damages could come from advising? They're not handling money. They don't have any pecuniary interest. Well, we're afraid they advise us poorly on lower people. I'll go and drive them around in one truck or a van. I don't know. Why do we have to indemnify someone who's advising us? And the Attorney General might be able to tell us, but I don't see anything here requiring indemnification. I don't. So the minister may want to look at that. Then we look at the register. What's the purpose of the register? I am stumped with that one, Madam Speaker. Register for what? So we can know who the old people are. We all know that. From that register, is there some degree of recognition? They get something from it? What? If you're only going to register it, it's voluntary, albeit. But why would we want the first rule of thumb in management 101? Don't collect information you can't use or you don't have any need for. What are we going to do? Put a register of the old people there? The older persons, the 6 elected members from Georgetown told us how many older persons we have in this country by year. What you need to know my name for? Because I'm over 65, you need to know my name? But I understand it's voluntary, Madam Speaker. But what's the purpose of it? For information? What you need information for? Wow. Anyway, Madam Speaker, let that be where it's at. And you see, I see the successive areas put in this bill that is already represented elsewhere, like the right to vote. What is the age limit on that? There's no age limit. The only problem you have with voting is whether or not you have been adjudged insane. You don't need repeated there. Oh, you're not physically able, then you can use the, well, provisions are made for that, mobile voting. So, some of us will not be physically able to, nor mentally able to go out vote. Our stress does take us down. But I don't understand the need for it, Madam Speaker. I really don't. And I may be wrong, and there may be some simple explanation for all these things to be put in the bill. On the appointment of the council, Madam Speaker, the makeup. The council shall consist of the following members, each of whom shall be appointed by the cabinet. Members, A, members who are older persons of varying ages and representative of each district in the Cayman Islands. Really? How many? We know we have 19 electoral districts. We know we have 6 districts, geographical districts. I don't know if it's a little oversight that it should be 6, 1 from each district, or 2. I thought I heard the minister said 2. I don't know if he put a number on it. 1 older person. Well, I think we should stipulate it here. 1 person. No, it says of varying ages.
But all over 65, but you can't be an older person unless you're over 65. You should be able to put somewhere around the 40, 50.
I don't know. Well, I guess we'll get that through the civil service. But, Madam Speaker, I don't mean to be disruptive or come across as not wanting this, or critical, but I want to see more. That's basically it. I want to see more done, more teeth. Because if you're registered, I don't know the benefit of it. There's nothing, despite it being voluntary. What is the benefit of an older person being registered with government? When 99.999% of them already registered over cynical, health insurance, pension, I don't know, one of those different departments where they could be registered. ESO has a register, albeit the numerical amount of older persons. But we can pick them up. We don't need to ask them to come in and register. We know everybody from different areas, the voters list. If it is to, say, send out circulars to them, invite them to things on a regular basis, I don't know. Are we going to have an organization of older persons that they meet once every 6 months? I don't know. I don't know the purpose of it. Maybe someone can tell us that. But certainly, it would be a good idea if that's the objective. But somebody needs to say what it is, because we don't see a lot of it. And Madam Speaker, a little more teeth. little more teeth than council, or a little more commitment, definitive commitment towards older persons. Clear cut, government will hire, will give you a priority to hire older person. One, government will waive all import duties, and all services will be reduction of 15, 20%. That's the kind of stuff that we need put in there for older persons. And then in there, encourage the private sector to extend discounts to the older persons. That's the kind of stuff I want to see the council responsible for. Government can only do what government has control over, and that is import duty, waive of import duty, those kinds of stuff. Commitment to hire once you have in a job that is less physically demanding. That's the kind of stuff I want to see in this kind of legislation. And it will lead the way for the private sector. Madam Speaker, you legislate, and it becomes a way of life. And people follow, you know. Courage is contagious. Trust me, Madam Speaker. When the government courageously goes and gives all these things, the private sector can follow suit. That's the kind of stuff I want to see. Because there's only 4,000, what is 6%? 6 or 7%, I believe he said, of the older persons in the country. 6%, 6.7 or 7.6. He said billion? No, he's talking about Cayman when he said that. I think he said 6 or 7% of our population is older persons. But he was quoting 2014, then 2015, I think. That's a drop in the bucket, Madam Speaker. You could tell me we cannot look at our old people better? We know the pension. We talked about that, what it means. They cannot afford to live in this period of this country's history. I know the Minister for Finance would have to go back and crunch his numbers, but, Madam Speaker, how many of them are going to get due to exemption? Yeah, I know we give the little assistance, but when they go to the shop, we encourage the private sector to give a little 10% off to anyone who was 65. Don't worry, Madam Speaker. I hear the Minister of Finance out there tell me about how much stop campaign. One of these days, I am going to witness him walking down the street with much more hair than he has on his head now, but grayer. I don't know if I get it anymore. But anyway, Madam Speaker, yeah, those are my concerns, and you know, if the minister can address some of them, if he's going to address those areas later on, then I understand. But we need to pick up some of those things. And there may be other things that I didn't speak of, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The first elected member from Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I better declare interest. Madam Speaker, I rise to offer my support to this very timely bill. I want to offer congratulations to the Minister for bringing it forward and observations they've made. Just a few things. I'll comment on the definition of access to services. Includes the affordability, physical accessibility, and the maintenance of an acceptable standard of services provided to older persons, and not merely adequacy of supply. The sixth elected member from Georgetown touched on what I think is a very important area, and I think my colleague from Northside and East End, in regards to the health care. And 12.1, access to rights of older persons, refers to benefits and treatments as provided in this law. These benefits, Madam Speaker, would certainly extend into these areas. Social inclusion is another definition in there, referring to their basic needs, make sure their basic needs are met so they can live in dignity. Madam Speaker, one of the things that I've noticed, and most of us that go around the elderly, is the problem of loneliness. I don't know how we can bridge some of these gaps, and the Minister and I have talked about this a number of times, that yes, they need certain helps, but just that company, that someone go and visit them and spend some time with them. I know that in our district, my other colleague from Borden Town, there's an elderly lady that he and I have been working on for about 6 months or so more. And what I'm referring to, Madam Speaker, is a conduit from what is now in legislation to deal with these elderlies, to get them into the agencies like NAU or whatever else is going to help them, that this be looked at and can be put in a more structured manner. But once again, I want to thank the Minister for bringing this very important piece of legislation, and we finally got something that I've been waiting on for a long time. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The fourth elected member from Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will be brief as well. I just wanted to rise to give my support to the Minister for bringing this bill. In the time that I spent as his counselor, I know this is something that he had been working on, and it was an important initiative for his ministry, so I'm pleased to see that it's come forward. I do take note of the concerns raised by in particular, the member from East End, Madam Speaker. And just along the lines of, having the law advocate more for elderly persons. I know a number of retired people, and I'll beg for forgiveness when I say this, but my mother is among them. She doesn't like to be referred to as elderly. But she falls into that category, and I know through my experience with her that she likes to be kept, even though she's retired, she wants to be kept busy. She wants to be kept feeling productive. And I think that goes across the board for, I think, all elderly people, that they don't want to see efforts like this, Madam Speaker, as sort of efforts that are diminishing their importance in society. And they want to see some real opportunities come forward. So, and including what the sixth elected member for Georgetown has said, I really do want to see us advocate a bit more and provide for more. And I know the minister has suggested that there's more to come. So I definitely would support that. And the only question I really had, Madam Speaker, was the purpose of the registry. What effectively would that accomplish by registering persons as elderly? And I'm sure the minister will touch on that when he winds up. But just to congratulate the minister and thank him, Madam Speaker, I know our seniors are valuable members of our society, and we have to do all we can to ensure that their lives continue to be productive and that they have a good quality of life. And I think I see this as an important step in achieving that. So just to thank the minister.
Recognize the fifth elected member from Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to also support the minister in bringing this bill forward. Perhaps selfishly because I'm feeling a bit older these days, and that at some point in time, though, without the tongue in cheek, that some of the clauses in here, I would hope that they would apply. But seriously, Madam Speaker, we owe the older generation a lot of gratitude and a lot of respect. And, you know, things that discriminate against them, their ability to be productive members of society, their ability to pass on that knowledge, we need to protect and preserve as long as possible. As we go, some of my fondest memories and probably most instructive memories were with my grandfather and just sitting on his front porch and realizing that as much as I thought I was traveled, as much as I thought I'd lived life, a pale in comparison. Our older persons should never be just put aside at some arbitrary time when we think that now they're reached a certain age, that they're out to pasture. Because the one thing that I realize is that Cayman and pride goes far and long in life. And sometimes these older persons will feed off how we treat them. And if we treat them with respect and dignity, I think that gives them a pep in their step for a lot longer. Madam Speaker, in terms of some of the things we could do for our older people, when I was doing just a little bit of research in what I was considering, to say about this bill, it's time that we looked at some of the jobs in the public sector and in the glass house and other places where people can be greeters and sit behind the desks and be receptionists, and just to keep that interaction going, Madam Speaker. Because a lot of times that's also very important to older persons. They want to be around people. They like, interaction. And I think it's time too that we look at a seniors discount program across the board. And this may not be government, but I'm sure it could be government led, right? Where we recognize that a lot of times older persons are on fixed incomes, and that, making ends meet sometimes requires a lot of the family members contributing because the pensions aren't as healthy as we wish they would be, especially given the time that they started before they retired. And, I think that's one way that we could respect our elders and recognize that they are sometimes in vulnerable financial positions, and anything that we can do as a country to perhaps adopt some sort of, reduce fees, be it insurance and other things, I think that would go a long way. Madam Speaker, I'm sure that the team that the minister has behind him, along with the chief officer and her staff, they'll look at trying to enhance this along the way. And I think that it's a first good step, and I applaud the intent in which the government has brought it. I think that they all should be commended in terms of, ensuring that it gets done before their administration is over, because these are some of the more important ones, and probably some of the more wide-reaching ones, and it's our own. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I thank the Minister and his team and the entire government for seeing fit to bring this before the administration is over. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The second elected member from Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to make a short contribution to the debate on this important piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, which I fully support. I believe it is a bill that is very timely. Madam Speaker, I have to say that when the bill, when Minister brought the matter first to caucus, I didn't have the enthusiasm at that time that I probably do today. And what a difference time makes, because I now find myself in the position of having an older parent who is in failing health and in need of services, and find myself grappling to find information and help deal with the issues surrounding an aging parent. And so I truly have come to appreciate very deeply you know, the need for legislation like this. Madam Speaker, the care for the elderly and addressing their needs is one that is going to continue to grow, not just in this country, but the world over. It is no secret we have an aging population. My colleague next to me, the sixth elected member for Georgetown, gave some figures for 2014, 2015, and we saw that the you know, approximately 6-7% of the population are considered to be persons considered to be older persons. But what resonated with me when I think putting my bookkeeping and accounting hat on, numbers hat on, when you look at 2014 and 2015, Madam Speaker, the number increased by 6.5%. That is probably more than 3 times the growth in the overall population of the Cayman Islands during that period. I think it's much more than that. But it's scary when you think that you get that kind of growth in a certain demographic segment of your population. That tells me that the issues and the challenges of caring for the aged are going to increase, and the demands for services, not just upon the government, but on the private sector as well, will continue to grow. It's going to get, I think, the demands are going to be much larger, no question in my mind. Madam Speaker, when I looked at what this bill seeks to accomplish and what this council is to do so, if it accomplishes 2 things, it will have more than justified its presence and its existence. First off, is that it is to serve as a referral facility to provide information on services and resources for older persons. That alone would be a godsend. Because what I find is that although there are lots of services and public and private available, gaining access to and understanding what those resources are and how to access them is truly a challenge in this community. It's not readily available. And you have to do some serious searching, asking, and probing to find it out. And I have to say, in my position, I'm very fortunate where I am, because quite often I'm able to get at information in terms of services available through government very quickly, not just from others who seek and look for assistance. But for the ordinary person on the street, it is not easy to find those resources and how to access them. And so I think that is extremely important for this council, and would be something that would be, very important for them to tackle right away in terms of a central repository of information. And then finally, Madam Speaker, advocating on behalf of the aged and the older people. They need someone looking out for them. And I think quite often we tend to, in making decisions, tend to overlook or to not give them the consideration that they deserve. And I think that that is a big part of the potential success for this council in advocating for older persons. Madam Speaker, I like the makeup too of the council, because when I look at it, Madam Speaker, what I see, having a doctor there, having a lawyer there, having people from the Health Ministry, the Ministry of Education, and Community Affairs, what I see there is a council made up of people in positions where elderly persons, these are the types of services and ministries and service providers that older folks would need the most access to in terms of someone advocating for them, or access to the types of services offered by these ministries and by the private sector. So I think it has strike, in my mind, it strikes the right balance, and it is the right composition to be most successful in achieving the aims, goals, and aspirations of the older persons policy and the intent of this bill. So, Madam Speaker, I fully support the bill that is before us. I congratulate the minister on bringing it forward. I also want to congratulate the ministry as well for their diligence in getting it completed and getting us to this point where we can approve it and have it passed into law by this Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognize Honourable Minister responsible for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too rise to give my support to the bill. Madam Speaker, I just want, being the last person to speak, of course, just about everything's been said. Madam Speaker, but I too agree with what has been said with respect to the employment of older persons. Madam Speaker, on the campaign trail, I noticed many persons who had retired and were looking for something to do. Some of them were just bored. Some of them actually needed the income. Madam Speaker, it's for that reason why I agree that we ought to put our heads together. I think this is something upon which all elected members seem to agree. Therefore, we ought to put our heads together, Madam Speaker, and see if we can come to some way of providing a comprehensive range of benefits for the older persons. And Madam Speaker, as with everything where there's a benefit, you have to be extremely careful, because there are those who would abuse or encourage people to abuse. So I would say, I would agree that we need to do so, but with caution. And Madam Speaker, as I am being reminded that there is a cost attached to it, so we would have to sit down as a group of responsible, mature men and women and determine how best to provide these benefits to the elderly, and see what impact it may have on other services that are being provided, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, with respect to seeing friendly, familiar places in the government administration building, that's a complaint that I get frequently from people who come to visit me. They would sometimes remark that they feel as though that they're not trusted. And they shouldn't feel as though they're not trusted when they come to see their representatives who they trust. So, Madam Speaker, perhaps, yes, that would be one place to start, one place to see the improvement. And Madam Speaker, the bill also provides for the functions of the council. And of the 5 that are listed there, Madam Speaker, the 6th elected member for the District of Georgetown referred to the first one to serve as a referral facility to provide information on services and resources for older persons. But Madam Speaker, the one that I think would also be extremely helpful, especially for myself when I'm trying to do my job in finding employment for older people, is to promote a skills bank of older persons. Because if we have a central repository of skills and abilities for older persons, it becomes a convenient place to look when trying to place those persons with employment. Madam Speaker, I get frequent representation from older persons who are looking for work. Some of them in the construction field, and they'll tell you that I'm still very skillful at what I do. I can't work as fast as a 20-year-old, but then the 20-year-old isn't as skillful as I am, is what they've often said to me. There are other ladies who were in the offices and are, quite capable at using computers, have excellent customer service relations skills, and are just looking for something to occupy themselves, to give themselves some sense of purpose, and to not sit at home and watch the four corners of the walls all day long. So, Madam Speaker, I thank the Minister for bringing this bill. I do agree that it is timely, and I'm sincere when I say that it would be great if we would put our heads together and see how we can identify the ways in which we can make life better for the older Caymanians who, not that they are forgotten, Madam Speaker, but the pace of life and the society changes rapidly. And therefore, we have to continue to try to find ways to reintegrate them into the happenings of each day. So, Madam Speaker, for that reason, I say to the Minister, a job well done, to his ministry, also a job well done. Thank you.
Recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too would like to rise and make a short contribution on a bill for a law to promote, protect, and advance the well-being of older persons, to establish the Council for the Older Persons and for incidental and connected purposes. Before I make my remarks, I want to certainly congratulate the Minister. I've seen him work on this for months now, and I know how important it was for his vision and one of the things that he wanted to accomplish. So kudos, hats off to the Minister. Madam Speaker, we say we nurture our youth and give dignity to our elderly. I will say this on behalf of your good self. I'm going to be bold enough to do that, and myself. I think that we see the elderly, especially at the rest home in Cayman Brac, and are very grateful for the caretakers there, and certainly the lady, I'm going to call her name, is Anna Rose Scott, who puts on the elderly parties and makes sure that there's a vibrant feeling and chance for the elderly to get together. Madam Speaker, I think what is so important in this bill is that as we looked at the elderly and thought about, are they really being protected? And we look and see access to services. Now it's going to be someplace where we'll actually see the law and know that they're protected in that way, that the accessibility will be made available for them. The care that we see, but it'll be in one place that we know that it'll include the physical and psychological and social needs will be addressed. Oftentimes, we think about the confidentiality of the elderly that are vulnerable when we visit them, whether they're at home or in a rest home or in the hospital. And this addresses that. It means to keep private and entrusted matters. Discrimination, treatment, consideration, making a distinction in favor of or against a person based on a group will be dealt with here. Madam Speaker, it goes on to talk about social inclusion and the dignity that they deserve in a life well spent of what they have contributed and done for this country. Madam Speaker, I am very, very happy about one of the programs that the Premier announced in his last State of the Union address, and it was spearheaded by Deputy Governor. But this is our tourism awareness of some of the elderly that are working at the airport now, and some of the initiatives that were talked about earlier. These are actually
this is actually an initiative that is taking place. And the idea was for some of the elderly ambassadors to be there and made available as people arrive on a plane, that they meet them and they take them through. And of course, you know, us all being good Caymanians, the first thing we want to know is where you're from and how long you're going to be here. And this is the type of experience they need and experience that we're providing for them. And very, very pleased to be able to just mention that today. I know it's important to the minister as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's initiatives like this that have lasting meaning to our elderly and gives us comfort of the protection that this will provide. So again, in these short remarks, I want to congratulate the minister and his staff and all the people that worked on this, and say it'll have my full support, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Honourable Minister responsible for planning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I had the privilege of acting for the Honourable Minister when he was away on official business, when this initiative got off the ground. And at the Family Life Center, there was a gathering, and there were many of the older folks who were there at the time, and certainly there were many enthusiastic individuals there. Madam Speaker, it is obvious with the timing of this legislation that the whole impetus here is for the committee to be appointed by way of the legislation for the work to continue, because as I understood it then, and I don't think anything has changed, this is a 20-year plan. So it is not something that everything is going to happen one fell swoop. And I'm sure the minister will expound on that. But Madam Speaker, I just wanted to say that for my personal experiences, some of the most cherished individuals to me in this world today are the older folk. I've said this before, but I want to say it again because it rings true to me every day in my life. Were I to be errant at this stage of my life, just knowing so many of them and knowing what they think of me prevents me from doing anything that is untoward. And that in itself, I consider the best safeguard in the world, besides the big man upstairs. And Madam Speaker, I don't know who else cherishes that, but nobody can buy that, eh? No one. So these people are important in our lives in every respect. Some of us are lucky to have both our parents still. Some of us, both parents have gone on. Some of us have one parent left. But regardless of what they may not be able to do today that they were able to do 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, Madam Speaker, I want to dare say their existence alone, with all the memories that we share, is enough to ensure that we, not only as a legislature, but as a nation, do everything that we possibly can for them to spend the rest of their days in dignity, and for those who want to remain active, to find the avenues through which they can remain active. And Madam Speaker, let me commend the Minister and all of his ministry staff and all of the individuals and private citizens who participated in the district meetings and who brought forward ideas of their own to help drive this process to where it is. And Madam Speaker, it is pleasing to hear all those who have spoken outside of their observations, ensuring or agreeing that notwithstanding any ideas which they may want to add to the pot, that everyone is in support of it, and certainly I commend the bill.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister responsible for education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too rise to support what, in essence, the spirit of this bill for a law to promote, protect, and advance the well-being of older persons and to establish a council of older persons and for incidental and connected purposes. Madam Speaker, certainly we've heard a number of reasons why this bill is not just timely, but necessary. Madam Speaker, we as a country must never forget, and as individuals, we must also never forget the contributions that not just our older person played in the development of this country from a historical perspective, but what they play and the roles that they play in contemporary society as well, in terms of, in many respects, holding the family unit together, being the backbone to many family units where we have a society where many of the younger persons may themselves be parents now and need to rely on their parents, the grandparents in this scenario, to help with the provision for child care, looking after the loved ones in that regard. And so certainly, Madam Speaker, I believe this bill is timely in that it helps us to put focus, put attention, but also put recognition on, as I said, not just from a historical perspective about the contributions of older persons, but also what they do and how critically important they are to the effective running of the society. And I certainly, for one, want to publicly thank all of the older persons in our community that fill that role as dutiful and doting and caring and loving members of our community to their own grandchildren, other children in the community and wider family, and certainly want to publicly acknowledge the grandparents in my own child's life in that regard. And certainly, in many respects, my own mother is the beacon of what I've just been talking about. So, Madam Speaker, I also believe, and having had the opportunity to participate in the session briefly that they held at the John Gray Memorial Church in West Bay when the older persons policy team came to West Bay to talk about these issues initially in terms of finding solutions to the real concerns that older people may have today, some of the chronicling basically their experiences. And I know the minister had tabled, I believe, that policy, the older persons policy, on the floor of this House previously, and that pretty much report is a summary of all of the various activities that took part on behalf of himself and his ministry to come together and pull together what is the National Older Policies Person, which we have adopted, and now we see this bill, which is the second phase, I guess, in actually implementing the policy. And so, Madam Speaker, as was indicated in the debate so far, I think, and I'd like to echo and also acknowledge again in particular the work of many of the churches that in this country, but certainly I'd like to single out to some degree the work of John Gray Memorial Church, because I know that they're very active in having a seniors social on a monthly basis. And I think it was the first elected member from Bordentown that talked about the isolation that elder people often feel in the community. And I believe certainly that activities such as these monthly socials really help to bring some sort of enjoyment, fulfillment, feeling connected with their peers. And I too support the idea and would hope that as a part of this implementation of the policy as we go along as a country, we look to find ways to strengthen those types of relationships. But as I said, not just about having older people come together. It's great to have them come together and socialize amongst themselves, to get reconnected, to stay connected. But it's also critically important that we create opportunities for them to connect to the younger people in the community as well, and making sure that we pass on some of those traditions, some of those aspects of our cultural heritage that can only be passed on by the knowledge and having that interaction with our older persons. And so certainly, Madam Speaker, that has been the impetus behind the Old Time New Year Family Fun Day, which as one of the representatives for the District of West Bay, that I saw fit to start from the very first year that I was elected in office on January 1st, 2014. And a big part of that initiative, and as the words say, Old Time New Year, it recognizes the contributions, the importance of who we are, our older persons, and their contributions to this society. And it also is a great way to bring together the younger generation, the children, and even my generation, who may not on a day-to-day basis have that interaction or appreciation for our elderly people in the community. So activities such as that and other activities, as I said, the monthly socials that churches such as the John Gray Memorial Church in West Bay and other organizations do in the various communities, is absolutely critical, and it's absolutely vital to ensure that our older people feel appreciated and actually have the opportunity to stay connected. Madam Speaker, we also heard about employment and the need for greater employment opportunities for persons who may be reaching their golden years, but for whatever reason, either by choice or either by circumstance, need to continue to work. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that we've heard one of the initiatives by the Honourable Deputy Premier that the government has put in place through the Tourism Ambassadorship Program that has been launched. But certainly, Madam Speaker, from the Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs perspective, again, one of the early programs that were developed and launched when we took office was the Pastoral Support Worker Program. And whereas, Madam Speaker, that program in particular isn't necessarily just targeting older persons in the community, it does require that to be a part of this program. And this program is the program that we've launched in the schools, where we have members of the community who aren't necessarily trained educators, but they are offered training to be able to assist, to act as guides for certain students who need the support, who may need the extra kind of pastoral, or for lack of a better word, parental, to some degree, guidance that having that individual in the school would provide. And so this is certainly open to members of our elderly community as well, and those that would have been registered with the NWDA would have had an opportunity to apply for the program. And again, as I said, it's a way to ensure that we create real, tangible employment opportunities that are available to our elderly people. We've heard examples about persons, retired police, or persons who may act as security guards, etc. I wholeheartedly support that suggestion and have been making those suggestions for a number of years now. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that as a government we recognize through the bringing of this bill, and certainly by accepting and acknowledging the need to have a policy geared towards ensuring the participation of our elderly people in the community, it is absolutely critical, just as I firmly believe that young people and youth empowerment is something that I've certainly lived and promoted from the time I was considered a youth. I firmly believe that having this similar type of approach when people get on the other end of the spectrum is also vitally important, because the knowledge, the wealth, the experience that the older generation has should not be lost and left with them, or are not able to kind of capitalize on that. So certainly I agree with involving them, and as I said, having had the opportunity to listen and, well, primarily listen, because it was a learning experience for me as well, to the discussions that took place at the West Bay meeting of the Older Persons Committee, to hear them talk about the issues, but also putting forward solutions. Many of the solutions we heard in here today, but other solutions, Madam Speaker, that is also very, I think, innovative in a way that will hopefully be able to help us as a society address what they're experiencing. Because, Madam Speaker, as they say, those who feel it know it. And whereas I'm probably the furthest away from being a beneficiary of this policy than anybody else in this House, I certainly have had the experience of living and growing with an older family member, grandparents, in the home when they got of age, where they needed to be cared for and protected and supported. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that promoting a sense of greater independence amongst elderly people is certainly something that I believe would be captured as a part of the policy and the legislation to be developed going forward as well. And Madam Speaker, as a government, just to give a brief example of how we have already considered some of these concerns and put some practical ways to address the ability for older people to live more independently, the government has, through the work of the Department of Labor and Pensions, we have adopted a new retirement savings arrangement scheme whereby the pension payouts of the elderly persons will actually increase as they get older. Again, it depends on the pension, sums to begin with, but certainly for persons who have had pensions and able to, contribute to their pensions, they would be in a position to get more and more of those funds as they get older and older, as their expenses actually increase due to medical needs, etc. So, Madam Speaker, this is the first time since the pension scheme was introduced in the late 1980s that we have seen and we have taken as a country a look at how we can improve the actual pension payouts to this degree, and I certainly will be talking more about that when we speak about the government motion to bring in certain regulations. But, Madam Speaker, also in wearing the hat as it relates to education and ongoing training and development. Madam Speaker, this government, certainly since we took office, there have been a number of initiatives that have been developed and launched through the Cayman Islands Library Services in particular, and many other organizations, but I can speak to some of the targeted training programs that have been specifically targeted to the elderly persons. You had to be of a certain age to be able to access these training programs for computer literacy and other types of IT literacy. Because, Madam Speaker, we know that the community we're fast changing. Everybody has, a smartphone or access to a smartphone, and there's all of these types of technological advancements that are happening fast and furious. And many of our elderly people are feeling left behind because they obviously didn't grow up in the age of technology. So it was important for us as a country, and certainly from the Ministry of Education's perspective, to try to create these opportunities for our elderly people to get the knowledge. And these classes, Madam Speaker, were hosted in the districts themselves, so it wasn't just the central Georgetown location, but many of these classes took place over the past several years in a number of the districts themselves. So again, Madam Speaker, recognizing the need to provide the lifelong learning experience that we talk about as a goal for the country, but actually giving real practical opportunities for that to happen. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I'd just like to say that I support the bill, and I thank the Minister and the Ministry for bringing this forward, and certainly as the Ministry of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs will be represented on the Council as proposed, we would certainly look to ensure that we continue to create these opportunities, which we've already started to address in this term going forward, to ensure that our elderly people are given the best opportunities to contribute to their own well-being, their own independence, but as I said, certainly to the well-being of this country as a whole. And I thank each and every one of them for doing so.
Does any other member wish to speak? The third elected member from Westby.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I too raise, and this will not be a campaign speech. I would like to congratulate the member responsible for bringing it in his staff and the sixth elected member from Georgetown from putting some pretty good figures to it to make it that much more meaning. To the minister, congratulations, and thank you for bringing a meaningful motion to the House. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does the Honourable Minister responsible for financial services?
Madam Speaker, I rise to indicate that I obviously fully support this bill. Every one of us can claim to have an interest, Madam Speaker. I don't think any one of us want to give up well, we have some that are there who we have to recognize, but those of us who are not there yet don't want to give up our, in this case, 75 necessarily. So we hope to, in doing this legislation, recognize that we are a country that values our people, values our older people, and gives them dignity, gives them an ability to live their lives in comfort and be valued and feel productive. And I would join join the rest of members who have spoken in support in congratulating the minister, for bringing this bill. I'm surprised, Madam Speaker, that it's really taken this long for us to have a bill like this presented and to this point in this Honourable House, because I think we have for a very, very long time recognized that we've had a lot of issues relating to older people. We all know through our interactions with our communities, we all know people that really are in need of support, and the framework around this bill, I think, is one which goes a long ways to addressing some of those concerns. I think the minister has indicated that this is only the start of it. There will be other things to come. So clearly, there are other things that we do need to do as a country. But this is a great start, I think, Madam Speaker, to address some of the concerns, and I join others in congratulating the minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I'll recognize Honourable Minister responsible for children, for Community Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hope that you all can bear with me to the break. But let me first of all say what a good feeling to stand here and pilot a bill such as this and to receive the bipartisan support that we've seen here in this House today. Even with the comments and with the suggestions and questions, it shows that everyone is sincerely and fully behind an older person's policy and the resulting legal framework to follow. Madam Speaker, what we have here is a 20-year policy that I tabled recently, and, sorry, a 20-year and a 65-page policy. And that is significant, Madam Speaker. It speaks to the amount of work that has gone in by the steering committee and the implementation committee, and now
a council that has legislative backing to further this process. It was felt very important that we take this first legislative step, that we know that this process is going to continue from here on regardless. This council now has legislative backing as of today once we approve this bill and pass it into law eventually. And that is very important. There's a lot more legislation to come, and I want to assure all members who have spoken of that fact, along with regulations. As I said, the policy is a 65-page policy, and it was done in consultation with a large group of stakeholders and many, many older persons. Madam Speaker, I did not envisage my response to this bill presentation today to have to be lengthy, but actually, out of all of the good debate that has flowed, there are certain things that I would like to just give members a peace of mind and assurance about.
Honorable Minister, by the length, do you mean more than 10, 15 minutes? If so, I'll take the break now.
I think you should.
We'll take the afternoon break at this time.